going to panel number 3, which will deal with the increasing role of corporate ventures in entrepreneurial financial journey. Corporate ventures invest in startups due to different objectives. One of the key questions is how corporate ventures fund startups in different phases, from early stage through expansion to IPO. And I think that we have an amazing speakers that will try to address to this question. I will have the honor to slightly moderate the panel itself. So I'm not going to say and to call myself. I will start with the fellow Table 29 member from the gala dinner, Jeffrey Steiner, President of Ontario Business Angels Canada. Jeffrey, welcome. The floor is yours. A fellow WF member, Fabrice Tester, a board member of Luxembourg Business Angels Network. Fabrice, the floor is yours. And also, like I said before, last but not least, a dear friend of mine, Hugo Mendes, coming from Makauto Group, CFO, Taiwan. Hugo, the floor is yours. So basically, we made a gentleman agreement. What shall we do? These 3 gentlemen will have roughly 7 minutes each to present their ideas and to say what they think about this important topic, and we will leave roughly 9 minutes for Q&A session. So, Jeffrey, because you're coming from Canada, it is the long distance country of all, because Hugo is Portugal, it's not Taiwan. Jeffrey, your 7 minutes.
There it goes. Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us for the afternoon. We're only a few minutes behind, so I won't go on and on and on and on, but I'll make a few observations as part of the panel. My organization, my background for Angel Investors Ontario is more at the earlier end of the startup spectrum. Companies that have their first round after friends and family, but their first round of about 500,000 US to 2.5 million. So well before IPO, generally speaking, companies whose stage of development are a little bit before what the venture capitalists would be looking at. In some cases, the VCs will co-invest with our angels when a good company is looking for $2 or $3 million. A subset of the VC community in Canada and my city of Toronto will co-invest with the angels. We have quite a bit in Canada, and particularly in my part of Canada, the province of Ontario, capital is Toronto. It is the corporate center of most of Canada. About 50–60% of all of our company headquarters are in the city of Toronto, or the region of Toronto, even though it's only one province of 10. So there's a lot of activity, including Canada's largest corporates and the regional Canadian headquarters of lots of global companies. So, Google's Canadian headquarters would have thousands of employees in the Toronto region working for the various parts of Google or Amazon Web Services, etc. So we have a great deal of interest in our ecosystem by large corporates, both domestic and Canadian. The interest starts in some cases with very large corporates at the earliest stage. We have in our area a special public-private partnership between our provincial government, the state level government, and the private sector involving large companies, where technologies that are developed at the universities that are fully developed but laboratory bench tested, those innovators at the university level right at the beginning are teamed up with large receptor companies. So in IT or computing from our universities, there may be some government funding that supports applied commercialization of technology, let's say between IBM and some innovators in computer sciences or faster computers or chips, these kind of things. So the corporate interest and venturing actually begins at a very, very early stage, partly because of this public-private partnership, which has the funding from government, but only predicated where the investor, large corporate entity, is involved. In clean tech, I can give another example of some technologies for the mining industry. And one of our largest global mining companies would be working directly with a team of 6 or 7 researchers, and the researchers may have some people in marketing, et cetera, working with them out of the university. So I just wanted to explain that corporate involvement is quite a bit involved even before the angel investors have been presented with a team and an opportunity and a technology. So it's really, the corporate interest is a gift for our startup community. Canada is a very small country population-wise. It's very large geographically, the second largest country in the world, almost as big as Russia. It takes 6, 7, 8 hours to fly from one coast of Canada to the other, but there's only about 33, 34 million people. So any startup, particularly a tech startup, has to be thinking about the global marketplace. And many of these corporate interests, whether it's IBM or it's Google or Amazon, kind of force our entrepreneurs, our founders, to think globally right off the bat. And so that is so it's quite a welcome impact in terms of the innovation culture in our small country of Canada. Um, the other the other aspect that I would mention that we see quite a bit of is where the large companies are in a way almost trolling through our ecosystem, looking for slices or a missing piece in their own large business, where they can add that piece to their offerings. So it's not always a big company investing in one of our startups and then buying it in a YPO. It can be 2 or 3 years of connecting, meeting, working within our ecosystem as the representatives of large companies, American, Chinese, European, et cetera, in our Toronto ecosystem, are following these companies as they move along. They haven't made an investment yet, but they spend some time learning about the founders' approach to innovation. And so there's a lot of collision, the phrase collision of these different industries, the different players bumping into each other, almost serendipity. There is an organized corporate serendipity by many of these very large companies that have hired people and send teams to set up in Toronto, go through our incubators, and spend time with them. And this happens in medical science sector, certainly in ICT and computer sciences. And I would have to say in the last 2 years, and we can talk about it on the panel as I kind of conclude the opening thoughts, AI. So lots of different companies that aren't in AI are understanding that AI can disrupt or help their companies. And so people who know very little about AI are spending a lot of time in Toronto and Montreal, where these are kind of clusters of expertise in this area, and seeing how these innovations maybe can be absorbed or invested into. I guess the last point I'd make is the large corporates investing in the startups, getting involved with the startups. There has been quite a bit of study done about that. Harvard, there's a professor, I think it's Professor X and some others, who have looked at the challenges of large corporations trying to innovate. And one of the recommendations, as they looked at successful examples in this fairly detailed Harvard professor and student team, was that large companies just don't have the agility or the speed, or their culture prevents them from being agile enough to innovate. And so they'd recommended, if you have an R&D budget and you're some multi-billion-dollar corporation, take 5% of that R&D budget, set up an operation separately from the main company, put it away somewhere else, and let them explore. And that seems to work well. And the main reason, other than a large bureaucracy, that governments, banks, private sector, once you're big, there is inefficiencies. There is the cannibalism thing. There's the inertia in a large corporation that even though they can discover this amazing next best thing in their industry, many players within that corporation don't want to see that innovation because it's disruptive and damages legacy investments they may have made. And I guess the best example of that was Eastman Kodak, once one of the most powerful, most important American companies. They actually invented the digital camera and completely invented it, and it was suppressed within Eastman Kodak because they wanted to protect their film processing business and their film processing thing. And as you all know, Rochester, New York used to be a major center, and now nobody even goes there. And Eastman Kodak lost out on the digital world of photography. So I don't know how many minutes I did because we don't have a clock, but I will shut up now.
Sorry. Thank you. You were very precise. Just for the camera, he was on time. Fabrice, please, your 7 minutes.
Yes. Not working.
Sorry.
Okay. Yes, so good afternoon to everybody. So I would like to share my personal story of at least one story and that I live. And let's go back 15 years ago. So it was 2005, and with different guys, we co-founded a startup. And our dream was to digitalize cinemas. Why? Because maybe some of you remember that at that time, most of the cinemas were still, while the world was already going digital, the cinemas were still analog. So there were this expensive 35mm prints, you remember, that were into the cinemas. And maybe for you as just moviegoers, for you it was not a huge impact, but I think we have seen since then that now with digital, the quality of the films are better, etc. So we started that company, and initially, you know, the business model was not probably the best business model, so we were not really taking off. And after changing the business model, where we decided to pre-finance the equipment that will be the projection equipments that will be placed into the cinemas, we were able to really take off. And what we did, we basically was that each time the movie was played, we will collect some tax from the distributors of the movies, and we will repay back the equipment. So doing this, we were able to raise a lot of money, about 150 million. It was a mix of debt loans, equity, leasing lines to pre-finance. And ultimately, we became a quite big group because after 10 years, we finished at 200 people, 100 million turnover. We had offices from London to Moscow. We had also an office here in Istanbul. And we digitalized more or less 1/3 of the total screens worldwide. So this took 10 years. What happened in 2010, so about 5 years after 2010, 11, so about in the mid of this story, because the digital copies were sent as on hard drives. And this was, of course, not the best economical way, and moreover, it was not a sustainable way to deliver the movies into the cinemas. So we were looking, can we do it in another way? And we decided probably satellite, because the fiber was not installed in all the countries. Maybe satellite would be the best way to do it. So when you look at doing this, we needed 2 satellite transponder. What is a satellite transponder? Is, let's say, the beam that allow you to use the satellite channel. And maybe some of you don't know, but one satellite transponder, the cost at that time was 1 million, 1.5 million per year for one. And we needed two. So 3 million of expenses per year. So it's a lot of money. So, okay, we have a big dream, but how to materialize our big dream? It's always, you know, when you are an entrepreneur, you need to materialize the dreams. And that's the most complicated part from my experience. So we were in discussion with different satellite operators. We had an international US company and a French company. And with the French company, we were starting using their services, etc. And we discussed, and this company is a big company. They are a public listed company, so it's a corporate. And so we discussed with them, and we said, look, we would like to do this, but to be honest, if we have to pay you just as a partner, as a suppliers, it will not work. So we can, of course, enter into a partnership, but we believe that the partnership will not really balance. You will be the winner, we will be the loser. So is there a way to do it differently? And progressively, we had this idea, maybe we could join our forces into a company and to create a company together so that they would invest somehow in a new startup. And this what happened in end of 2012. We decided to create a kind of joint venture where they were the majority shareholder. So they invested some money in cash and they invested somehow in kind by giving us some preferred rates for the satellite capacity. And this really allows us to take off again this new startup, and we deploy 1,400 sites all over Europe. And after 3 years, we were doing 5 million turnover. We were 15 people. And the story ended because we received an offer from a company. And for this corporate, we were not strategic. I mean, for them, it was a kind of side business. And at that time, what you have to imagine is that they had a net profit of 250 million euro. So our 5 million turnover, moreover, we were not generating a lot of profits. So for them, we were not super strategic. So they decided to accept the offer, and the company was sold. I was, let's say, also the CEO. They wanted to keep me on board, but you know, in this case, it's not really a big plan to stay on board, because I had also the idea more to scale again the company. But it is what it is, and so the company was sold. And so that's my experience working with a corporate, because during 3 years, we were somehow a kind of subsidiary of this corporate. Moreover, a public listed company, and they were the majority shareholder. This means that our accounts were consolidated with their accounts. And I had because my life was always with startups, so I had no experience with corporates. And there I had to work with a corporate. So what does it mean? And maybe this will be my conclusion, the pros and cons. I mean, the pros is that you have big resources when you work as a startup with a corporate. I think their means are somehow infinite for a startup. For example, that company, they have a kind of internal bank. So when we were in need of cash, for them it's not a problem. Oh, you need 500K? Well, that's not a problem. And they give you at very preferred interest rates. So for them, it's a kind of interco loan. So that's fantastic. So you need some extra staff, for example, for administrative tasks. Oh, no problem. There is someone that is maybe not full-time, so we can give you someone. So in that respect, also they have a huge network, so they can open a lot of doors. So, and if you want to, for example, grow by external acquisitions, they can also help you, because they are experienced in M&A, etc. So they can also help you in that respect. So I think really for a startup, if you can really work with a corporate fund like this, and if you want to scale, that's a super way to scale. Now, the cons, what are? They may ask some exclusivity. So this may also prevent you to work with some other clients. So that's a negative point. The other thing is all the administration. I said the consolidation, the accounts, the reporting, etc. And to be honest, when you are a startup founder, you are not used to that. So that's a big, big problem. They can a bit help you, but they request you a lot of documents and reporting, etc. And you spend a lot of time, as at least if you are the CEO or CFO, just spending a lot of time in this reporting. So that's a big issue in my opinion. Yeah, I think that's the main insight. I don't know if I respected more or less the time.
More or less, we're okay.
Okay, okay, you're welcome. Ah, sorry.
It's okay, don't worry, because of the camera. Thank you very much for being on time. Now we had a view from North America, then view from Europe, and now we have a combined Euro-Asian view. Hugo, your time for this panel.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. So you understood I'm a group CFO for MacAuto Group. MacAuto Group is the second largest producer of accessories in the automotive industry. We do sunshades, side window shades, luggage covers, sunroofs, this kind of stuff. And it will be very complementary, I guess, not only geographically, but as well, because you have given the side, my colleague Fabrice has given the side of the startup, and I will try to give the side from the corporation. And if I have time, I will even share a real concrete example. So basically, but before that, let me say that I think there is some challenges, and there are quite a lot. Not only for the corporations, but as well for the startups. And the whole idea, if possible, if it's to make it a win-win situation, which is not easy. Not easy on the side from the startup, as you already understood, they can take lots of things, but there are a lot of hurdles as well and problems. And from the corporation, it's the same, because they will be willing to apply the corporate mindset into the startup world, which are two different worlds. Okay, so the idea here is, how can we make it a win-win situation? Because from my experience, what happens sometimes, or lots of times, unfortunately, is that the corporation comes, what the corporation wants, he wants, for example, to have technology, intellectual property, access to new technology, something like that, or product or new services that they are lack of. So basically, this is what they are looking, and the startup is looking to scale or to grow, obviously. So at the end of the day, what happens sometimes is that the corporations are being a little bit eventually too much intrusive with the startups. And because they need to satisfy a need, they have this need, and eventually they start to cooperate. There is a lot of certain things that become better for the startup. You need funding, etc. You need one more person, etc. That's the kind of things that help the startup to grow. Yes, indeed. But on another hand, sometimes the startup become dependent and becomes like just an indirect employee of the corporation at the end of the day. And for some founders, even sometimes it is okay, but most of times it is not okay, because this is not what we are willing to do as the corporation. This is not what the founder of the startup is willing. So how to make this work in order for both of them to see each other, okay? For me, the best model is to try to keep the startup as autonomous as possible. Sure, with some methodology to have some reporting, not super heavy, light as we can, but of course we need to have the tracking. So one, and this is only just one of the ways, because we don't have enough time to share all of it, the possibilities. One of the ways is simple, is to say an open innovation. It's simply, okay, we have a problem, we need a new product, a new technology whatsoever. We call the market to say, is there any startup that is working on that? And then we let them come, we let them have and develop this idea that eventually they have already developed or are working on since quite a long time. And to let them be let, okay, then once it is identified, then okay, we choose that startup, make it formalize that to say, okay, there is an investment in it, but to let it be totally autonomous, not even saying, okay, I'm a shareholder, because at the end of the day, you will have some conflict of interest. And again, we go back to what I was saying, then the big corporation will see it as a non-direct employee or indirect employee or provider, eventually supplier, right? So the idea is that to let them grow, become scale up until to the point, and even eventually at that time and at the end of the day, to buy them. Like this, you can satisfy the need of the corporation that has a new technology, access to a new or service or product, and at the same time, you allow an exit to the founder, which eventually, ultimately, is his goal. And like this, you can join forces, create a win-win situation. So this is one of the best practice I see for the corporations not to take over and at the same time to let the liberty and to let the freedom, let's say, of the startup to do what they like to do in the way they do and not to try to put too much rules and not drain the startup with the corporate rules, those kind of things. Um, One important aspect of it, I always go back to this point, even though I'm a finance person, but I think it is a key issue as well that companies should address and especially have in mind and take into consideration is the cultural fit. Obviously, I'm looking for a new product or service or whatsoever, but at the end of the day, it happens that this startup is amazing, uh, the team is okay, but the cultural fit for whatsoever the reason from the founding team is totally different from the corporation. And what is going to happen is that is not going to work sooner or later because we are in such different worlds, let's say, uh, not only words on the economical aspect, on the size aspect, obviously, but really I'm talking on the cultural background fit. And when I say cultural, not because of geography, not this, or ethnicity, none of this, because of values, because of soft skills, because of what the company thinks it's important and what this startup thinks it's important in what they believe, not only on the technological side of it, and I always go then to the human side of it, because at the end of the day, it's about people. I was just listening to another panel, and we were exactly talking about one of the main key points. I'm also a business angel investor, and yes, indeed, we want the return for sure. But on top of that, it is important to invest in projects, but then to invest in people as well. And sometimes big corporations tend to skip this part. They see, oh, those guys, they have an amazing technology, they have something we need. Okay, let's just immediately or buy or invest in them without trying to. There is some due diligence, but again, paperwork, but not the human due diligence. And this is something that is, for us, for me, very important. And I think that indeed a lot of times we are skipping this part. Okay, time. I will just take 1 minute to try to share the example because I over time. Um, this example that we have done in Makauto. So because of my business angel activity, I came to find a startup that was doing an amazing thing, which is basically in 2 words, having in 3D digitalize either a product, either the plant. So by having the plant on the cloud, okay, through totally digital VR, then eventually, if you want to move a machine that you have sewing machine and you put it in here, and then you can immediately calculate and see what could be the benefits of moving around and moving the layout of your plant, you know, and we are talking big plant. And that makes a lot of difference. If you can earn 1 to 5 seconds per process, then you multiply by X hundreds of sewing machines, multiply by X factories. That's something that, of course, and me as a CFO, I will be looking into it. And in this thing, you could immediately say, okay, if I do this, then I have this profit. You could as well do the same for a product. When we are in the automotive industry, prototyping, we do a lot of prototypes. Lots of prototypes, it means a lot of investment that you just throw it away. Then you go to speak with the tier one, Volkswagen, whatever, and they say, okay, this is not okay, you do a new one, and a new one, a new one, and so on and so forth. It's a big investment. So if you can, at the same time, have and you say, what about if I decrease this piece by 1 millimeter, then you also could eventually calculate the gains of that change immediately. And you could have the advanced engineering team in Germany communicate with Taiwan live and the engineers doing the changes in live. So for us was fantastic and we did it. They are happy. I believe so, at least because again, and it is a Portuguese startup, by the way. So, and at the end of the day, I think made them grow. They have big new customer, of course, and for them, for us as well, it was very beneficial.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, our 30 minutes are already gone, believe it or not, because we all had a bit more than planned 7 minutes. It was my real pleasure to share the floor with these three gentlemen, and I'm more than sure that we all will see each other and them on the stage, maybe not the CEO, some other stage, see them on WBF 2021. Thank you very much.